You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Hey, you've found the Mom Next Door, Stories of Faith, and I'm Pam Fields. I'm so honored that you've joined me today. You know, I've been a mom for 27 years now, and I have 9 children. I can give you a solid piece of parenting advice today, and that's this. We will always have more to learn. You know how I know that? Because people often ask me for parenting advice, and I realize just how little that I know. We're jumping into an amazing topic today, and I've brought in an expert. She's going to help me answer the question, how do I motivate my kids? Truth be told, I struggle to answer this so much. So Elisa, here's the microphone. I want you to just take it away from me right now because I realize how unprepared I am for this question. I might jump in later, but I want you to introduce yourself, and I'll just be sitting over here with my pad and paper taking notes.
Okay. I'm Elisa Allen. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee, a clinical mental health counselor, a mental health service provider. And so basically what that means is that I've spent a lot of time learning about how and why people do the things they do. And because of that, and with my experience, I've spent a lot of time working with kiddos, working with families, and I've seen some things that kind of point to what works and what doesn't work with getting people on track and getting our children on track. I know as parents, we always just want them to go the right way. And so this is a very common issue that comes up often.
It is. It's super common. In fact, I have a mom's group on Facebook, Tending Fields Moms Group, if you're not there. And every now and then, I'm like, what are you struggling with? What can we work on? So many times it does come up. How do I get my kids to do X, Y, Z? And sometimes it's even, how do I get myself to do it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just jumping right in with that, I think the biggest thing that we have to start off with is that we're checking our own intentions. And I know that all of our intentions seem good at first, right? Like I want my kids to be good and wholesome and live the life that what's best for them, what the Lord has intended for them. But sometimes we get our wires a little crossed, and without realizing that, we're pushing agendas or pushing things that actually serve us more than they serve our children, right? And so perhaps you think that you're not a healthy eater, and so you're expecting your child to be a healthier eater than you. That's a common one. Or perhaps you feel like you spend too much time zoned out on your phone, and so you're kind of taking that need and desire and pushing it onto your kid. So, I mean, that would be the number one suggestion always, is to go back and be like, what is this desire saying about me? You know, we want to make sure that our children aren't living out, we're not pushing agendas onto them that are about us and the things that the Lord's actually putting on our heart for us to fix about us.
We were talking about that the other day in a totally different context, in that if the Lord puts a conviction on my heart for me to make changes in my life, and I put that conviction on you and force you into the conviction God led me to, that's a problem.
Absolutely. And I think it's easy to do with our kids, right? We have natural authority over them. And I know as a mother that I want way better for my children than what I've had. And so that means the hardships and the difficulties that I've fallen into, I want to avoid that for them. However, they're not exactly like me, right? And sometimes those are my expectations, my faults, my weaknesses that I haven't worked out yet. It's just very easy to place that on another instead of directing that energy back in toward ourselves.
It's so hard when you're like, and I think the Lord does this with us, as I read in the Old Testament about how the Israelites are like, come on, aren't you getting it? Like, I think that with my kiddos, you know, I've presented you this, why aren't you getting it? And I have to understand that the Lord does have something that he's teaching them incrementally, and it might be different than what he's teaching me, right? Nonetheless, we are the parent, and we do have to live in the same house, right? We do have certain set protocols or rules or all these things. And so if we break that down and we look at, say, cleaning our bedroom or, hey, you have to get your homework done or the dishes done, there are rules that we have to live in this world. So if we jump into that and think about, well, I don't know. I actually don't know how to ask you this. So So, so you're the expert. So help me out. How do I motivate somebody who maybe doesn't want to be motivated, or, how do we peel that back and,
Yeah.
and understand that a little bit more?
You're right. And, I think that a thing I think about often when people kind of talk about these issues is consistency is important, but consistency does not mean sameness. It doesn't mean that we show up over and over again in the same way. So, a lot of people will utilize things to say, like, God contradicts. Unbelievers or people that struggle in their faith believe or say things like God is contradicting himself in the Bible. There's a place in the Old Testament where he says, don't boil the goat in its milk. And, 2 or 3 pages later, it says, boil the goat in its milk. And so people use that as a contradiction. But for me, I think of it in my journey with parenting and in my journey with therapy. We meet people where they are. I am not changing because my expectations of you have changed. Where you are is where I go. And so we call that scaffolding. We meet people where they are and we go maybe just a tad above. So for example, where we are with a kindergartner and what we would expect from a kindergartner is not going to be the same thing we're expecting from a 5th grader. But we want to push them up to maybe that, level 1. And once they meet level 1, we move up to level 2, right? We're always expecting an inch or a smidge higher than what they are. And when we do that, we actually give children the ability to blossom and grow. So I think that's where we're going to want to meet our own expectations. We're going to show up in that place. And we know that God does that with us, right? When the Israelites moved and shifted, he moved and shifted with them. God is consistent. He does stay the same. And we stay the same as parents, but the way we say things or what we expect or the rules that we place need to shift and move too, based on where our children are emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, what's happening in other seasons of their life and other aspects. We have to be flexible in that as well, which is hard because, we hear often consistency is key. Tell them to clean the room every single day. And if you don't tell them that, then they're not going to do that. And that actually doesn't work, right? It just makes moms feel exhausted and burnt out and like no one's listening to them, which is a terrible feeling.
Well, yeah, because they start to tune out. And I have to admit, I tune them out sometimes too, right? Because how many times do they come up, Mom, Mom? I'm like, oh, sorry. It's like, how much later? And did you say something to me? Right? Because I realize, oh, you're saying the same thing over again. And then I get frustrated because, like, I may give the same instruction a million times, and then I'm like, why don't you ever listen?
Yeah.
Well, duh.
Yeah. And so it's like, how do we meet them where they are? How do we come a step down? So I think it's really important that we start to see where our kids are. A particular issue is like cleaning the bedroom. I find oftentimes kids don't actually know how to clean. So we may say clean the bedroom, but that is so overwhelming. Maybe that's a level 10 task and they're at a level 3.
Yeah.
And maybe, we think they should be at a level 10 because we've taught them. But it might look like saying, let's go in and see, can you pick up all the trash? Can you organize? Can you just put your clothes in the dresser, right?
Yeah.
And it's that taking those little steps, the scaffolding, taking the first few steps with them so that they start to build confidence. And then the next time, turns out, or the next 7 times, right? It turns out that they learn, okay, this is the way this works. I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to go ask Mom for help.
Right.
Instead of immediately being like, I don't know. Kids are never trying to just be disobedient. There's always a reason children are acting. And if we can get that in our hearts, we often question other people's intention without questioning our own. I don't know why I do most of the things I do. It's just, we kind of live on automatic, right? And kids are the same way. They're not trying to be defiant or disobedient, almost never. What they're trying, they just don't understand and don't have the words or the verbalization skills to be able to communicate what they really need.
Well, on this mom's group, somebody has asked that, how do I motivate my children? And I think I'm stumped. I'm not really sure how to answer that. And even so much as what you said has told me it's not a simple answer, and you're not going to give me a formula, because each one of our children is created different. Our home environment is different. And so, again, peeling back that layer a little bit more to understand what are some tactics? Are you going to give us some tactics?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the important things, and I just want to validate that, we are all individuals. We all have gifts and strengths. And so when we start from that, instead of starting from the rules, it's just a different way, right? When we always put people first instead of rules first, regulations first, life just is a lot simpler and a lot more enjoyable. And we get to enjoy like the true soul and nature of a person instead of only looking at their behaviors, right?
Yeah.
That's just such a shallow representation of who we really are. And so I think to like lead with that is to say, like, we need to do a values assessment. And so that's pretty easy to do. I actually have one linked on my website that you guys can get. It's really inexpensive and pretty quick, but you want to find out what actually matters to your child, right? I have one of my children who is super motivated financially. This kid loves to like mingle in the stock market. And I have another one who is not motivated at all by any of those things. If you promise her time with a cat, she's pretty much going to do anything you ask. But if you give her $100, she would likely put it in her shoe and throw it away. Forget it was in there, right? Like, it's just, kids are different. So you need to know what matters to them. And it's always good to shoot for like 2 or 3 really big values. Like, what are the things that this person needs to thrive, and knowing that that's indicative of the season that they're in and the spirit that God has given them. It's a really beautiful thing to know about each and every one of your children, and for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think those words you said, what matters to your child, so many times our chore systems and, quite honestly, my plans are created around what works for me and what matters for me, because I am seeing, I need this to happen. I'm super organized, where I'm like, okay, I need this to happen here and this to happen here and this to happen. And I get going so fast that I do forget a lot of times to really see that deeper, what's going on, what can I learn, and how can I adjust my life and my chore schedule around my child's needs. And I think that is a brilliant idea, where I can grow from that, from just that piece right there.
Yeah, and I do want to say, and just to, because everything I say I want to have tempered with compassion, because I am a mom, and if you met me and my kids out in public, they would probably be like, this is not true of her. She flips out if we don't clean our room, right? We are never going to be able to fulfill that 110%, right? We only can do that occasionally, and we can only do it with the Lord's help, and that's something to be prayerful of. But even if you only get 10 minutes of that a day, of saying like, what is special about this person, it truly makes a difference, right? You don't have to do it perfectly, but when we're in these places, and I think often as parents, we're kind of learning from this old behavioral modification or management system that says what matters to them so I can take it away, right?
Okay, are you asking for an admission here from me? Because the truth is, when my older children, now I have kids in their 20s, and then some, that the little guy's just barely 10. And when my older children were little, they really wanted a video game system. And I said, no way, no how. There's all this data. There's no way we're getting a video system in our house. And then my husband was like, maybe we should get one. Maybe that would be like a great opportunity to help learn, to teach them how to regulate their emotions, and how to, we don't want to have them never touch one, launch them into adulthood, and then have them not know how to handle it. And so, in my mind is like, ooh, you know what? If we give them this video system, then we can use it as discipline to take it away from them. And truly, that is one of my, like those adult children, we gave them video time so that we could remove it as punishment.
For sure.
And I think we're always learning along our road of parenting. Like I said, I may have 9 children, but you know what? Number 7, 8, and 9 are totally different from the first set. And I'm different in my life and my experiences. And so like I said, it's an admission, and now I could beat myself up. And then I go, okay, well, I've learned from that,
Absolutely. And I think that, it does work to a point to take those things away. And we do things because they work. But that factors into something called extrinsic motivation, right? And that's a really fancy psychological term, which means that everything outside of you is what's motivating you. And we know as Christians, that is not what we're called to do. We are not meant to be motivated by things of the world, other people's validation, the way other people perceive us. That is not what we're built for. We're built to be motivated by that voice inside of us, and that's called intrinsic motivation. That says, this is the right thing, so this is why you should do this. This is good for you, so this is why you should do this. This is holy or righteous, and that's listening to God's voice. When we take the things that our children are gifted with and their value system, right? All good things come from God. So their values, which are good and positive, come from the Lord. When we take those things and use them as punishment in the name of discipline, what we're doing is teaching them that those things can be removed from them and bullied from them in the world. And then they stop listening to those things, right? I've seen lots of kids who like don't care if their cell phones are removed, who don't care if they don't get that, who don't care if they don't get, video game time or money, because their parents have removed all of those things. So this really good gift of maybe wanting to be a financial steward or to be creative and have really positive interactions with other people has been squashed because it became a tactic to be controlled. And not out of like, parents are not trying to do the wrong thing. It's just we're all doing the best we can with what we have. And so when we know better, we can do better. And truthfully, seeing our children in this way allows us to help encourage them to have some of these things that motivate them on their own. Like, this is who you are. And so whatever you think is right in this area, right, I'm going to go with that until such time comes that I can't believe you or that's hurtful to you. And we'll talk about that here in just a second as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so what do you do if you see that your child is doing something that is maybe not beneficial for them and potentially harmful? How do we reroute?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we want to start off by doing is like gathering our resources, right? We want to figure out what's going on. Just like if your kid was sick, you would want to take their temperature.
Yeah.
You'd want to like get all your medicine supplies, get your homeopathic remedies and oils and your doctor all on call, right?
Right.
You want to gather those things up. So you want to do that in this place too, primarily so that we're not reacting, because as parents, we have so much love for our children that sometimes that turns into fear, and we want to control. Fear makes us want to control. So the first thing is to rally your resources, whether that's people around you, whether that's their friends, whether it's your friends, their friends' parents, it's your extended family, the things that they love, the things that have worked for other children or other people in your past. You want to rally those things around you. That's very, very important. And then another thing yes.
And I think that right there, it tells me to stop for a second, to
Yes.
not be so reactionary and have this freak out moment. If I'm going to gather resources, I need to breathe first, right?
Yeah. Always an important thing to take a deep breath and figure out what's going on with us.
Yeah.
We think better.
Yeah.
We think better over time, right?
True. That's true.
And then, the two big issues that I often see are this like yield towards anxiety and depression. And I'm using those words because of my training. And I know that sometimes those words are scary for parents, and I wouldn't want to hear those about my children either. However, when I say anxiety, I really mean like it's too much of something, too much fear, too much knowledge that we don't know what to do with or where to put, that starts to spiral into this imaginary world of things that aren't true, right? So when we hear anxiety, if I say that, what I mean is just basically too much energy that has nowhere to go. And then the other side is depression, and depression is like not enough fire, not enough oomph, not enough gusto to move forward. And those things do happen in our world. Our children are inundated with social media, with information. They live in an age that they can find anything out, and that has an effect on the human brain.
Yeah.
A study done 5 years ago showed that children in high school had the same rates of anxiety as people in insane asylums in the 50s.
Wow.
So the times are just changing. Our children have too much information, too much access. It just backlogs in our system, right?
Yeah.
So if that's you want to assess, like which one is happening here with my kiddo. So if we have too much information, what we want to do is start peeling some of those things back, right? Maybe they actually think 50 things are important, and we should focus on 3 and let them know that time's coming.
So are we peeling back, or are we totally ripping it away? Is it like one thing at a time we peel back, or do we need to be more gentle?
I think gentle's better, and I think it's always taking a temperature, right? And realizing that it's more of like a thermostat. Maybe in this season we need to function with maybe 3 or 4 things on our plate and not 55 things on our plate. They can't do those things well, right? Mm-hmm. And so we may start, if they're really super hyper into 8 or 9 activities or 8 or 9 courses or all these other hobbies, we may say like, what if we just take one of those away and we'll reevaluate that in a month? And if that's not working in a month, we may take 2 and come back and just start to see if that starts to help. You should see some pretty immediate results in that. Of course, it's not going to bring them down to 0 until we get to that right number for them. But children don't have that ability to moderate themselves. Children are not little adults. Their brains don't work in problem-solving ways. They're not even complete. That part of their brain is not even complete to do that. So we want to make sure that that's what we're here to offer them to do, right? Like the same as if they ate too much birthday cake and they had a stomach ache, we'd say, well, maybe next time you need a smaller piece. Let's try that instead. We wouldn't be angry and we wouldn't be frustrated, and we certainly wouldn't punish them because of that.
Yeah.
And then we get to see their natural self start to flourish again. Yeah?
Yeah. And I think truth is, we're going to record several podcasts today. And I know that we may talk about, these may overlap a little bit.
Sure.
But it's interesting to me how easy it is for us to take on like medical issues with our family, and we go, oh, okay, I'm going to do my resources, I'm going to check all this out, and I'm going to take a run at it this way. But when it comes to figuring out, how to do something like this, it's not physical, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it may show as physical.
Sure.
We're looking at chores and cleaning your room or whatever, but it's deeper than that. And so I think it's hard, and we don't maybe have the skills of that. We haven't been trained to focus and to peel that back in such a way as to know how to move forward. At least I haven't. That's something new to me.
Absolutely. It's new to our generation. And I think that that's hard because we hold ourselves to such judgment. But when we look at generations of 100 years ago, they were concerned with survival. And when you're concerned with survival, all that matters is the physical, right? Mm. If we're running for our lives, I'm not really concerned that you're anxious. But the fact is, none of us are running for our lives. Most of us don't live in survival mode anymore. And so because of that blessing, because of the security that the Lord has granted to us and the place that we live and the economic, financial stability that is in our world right now, we have this other thing that comes up. It's another layer. God says, now let's work on this part, right? It's a layer above the physical. And it's unseen, and unseen things are harder to grasp. It's easier for us to blame ourselves in those times. So it's easier to get like upset or reactionary in those things. And we don't have training. But the really beautiful thing is that when we take responsibility and we say, okay, I'm going to acknowledge myself about this, I'm going to get some wisdom, I'm going to get some resources, I'm going to have a game plan, then our children will start with that. And what will happen for our grandchildren will be exponentially better. And what will happen for their grandchildren will be exponentially better. And that is always such a hopeful blessing. Yeah. And it makes me feel better about not knowing all the answers with my own kids.
Yeah. I think we can always, there's a lot to be said for a parent who's continually learning too, right? If we just go in with all the answers and we say, this is how it's always been, this is how it's going to be, we're not modeling a teachable heart. So, hey, this is new to me. I hadn't really thought about this before, but now I'm learning.
Yes.
And, I want you to learn along with me. Please be patient and gentle with me as your mom, because this is new to me, but let's walk down this and try this out.
Yeah, absolutely. The other side of that coin that I wanted to mention was, it's depression or not having enough fire. Again, because of social media, because of the world that we live in, because of all the influences that our kids have, no matter how much we try to protect them, this is just the world that is. There are a lot of issues that sometimes come up about like self-worth or not loving ourselves very well or not feeling capable, able, qualified, suitable, lovable. All of those things come. And those are issues that drain the fire out of us, drain that life force out of us. So if you have a kiddo who truly just seems lethargic in those things and can't do those things, it can be really helpful to start to boost up that value system by giving direct input into those things. So giving them some power and autonomy in the areas that they're lacking can be very, very, very beneficial. And it starts to kind of create that internal motivation to spark new things, to give some energy into their life and some excitement. And that can be really hard, right? I'm thinking about kids who are in public school sometimes sitting in a classroom for 8 or 9 hours can get some lethargy. It's like all day long, all the things that I want or that matter to me or that I'm good at are drained away from me, and I'm having to be here. And so when they get home, They're often sleepy, hungry, sleep for several hours, don't want to do their homework, don't want to clean their room. And we could understand why that would be, because the thing that God has created them for, that they have this unique life force gift of, is not getting expressed. And just like any fire, if it's not fed, it'll eventually burn out, right? And so as parents, that's a really great place to jump in and do that.
We're hearing a lot on the news lately about high anxiety and high amounts of depression in children. So you were kind of explaining that to me, and I'm very visual. So I'm seeing more like a horizontal line with anxiety on one end and depression on the other. I think before I'd always thought of them as being on the same side, but it's almost like you said unspent energy is the anxiety, and then the depression is different than that.
Yeah, it's like no energy, right?
Yeah.
So they're two extremes of basically the same issue, right? And it's just dysregulation of the energy or the creative potential that we all have. So if we have too much, anxiety is what comes up, and we hear that a lot. People say anxiety to use words like instead of using words like fear, or terror, or nervousness, or even sometimes excitement. It's just too much energy. But they also say things like depression to mean things like sadness, unresolved anger, inability to grieve, those sorts of things. And those words are clinical terms, and because of the world we live in, again with access to everything, clinical terms have been applied willy-nilly to everything. And so I think I like using the other terms better. I think that makes a much clearer delineation, because our children definitely are not struggling with clinical diagnosis on the regular, right? That is only used to say, this is the treatment plan, this is what we're going to do. But when we're looking at them in our home, we can say, yeah, I see that you're paralyzed because you have an abundance of energy that you don't know what to do with. Or I see that you're kind of catatonic. You can't move. You can't get yourself to do anything because you don't have any energy. And yeah, that's a problem. It gives us better terminology, but you're absolutely right. It's two extremes of the same issue.
Okay, so how young do you see this? Like, you hear about little kids and you're like, oh, they're totally ADHD. They're, 2 years old. And I'm assuming that could be an actual diagnosis, but okay, so what in different age groups would that look like? You've got a 2 or 3 year old who's totally jittery and bouncing off the walls. And then I go, oh, this is a problem. This child is just, well, again, confession time. My oldest child, man, I could not figure out how to keep him busy because he was just always on wheels, right? And so, but maybe I didn't have the tools. So when I see that little one who's all over the place, maybe what I need to do is give them an outlet, because it might look anxious. It might look like naughtiness, but really I just need to be ahead of the game to find some outlets for that energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think that certainly we don't see depressive symptoms show up on younger than 8, almost never, because at that point children are still very vital, right? They're still really connected to that, just who they are, energy. They're living their lives, and they haven't had enough experiential time in the world to have those things quashed yet. So we may see, but we see more anxiety symptoms, right?
Okay.
In little kiddos. And certainly there's the energetic child, right?
Yeah.
And ADHD is a broad term to describe about 35 diagnoses that are not relevant right now.
Okay.
It just basically means that children are always seeking dopamine, right? They're needing a pleasurable reward. And so that's why kids are hyperactive in that way. So we want to give them something pleasurable. But again, if we can find what's in alignment with that, there's something for every kid. I think that's hard because oftentimes for young boys, it's being outside and wrestling and getting dirty and tearing things up and putting them back together, right? Things that we might say are destructive, especially for us moms who like to be things orderly and neat and tidy, and we're girls and we don't work that way, right? But for boys, that's often what that thing is. And so if we give them that outlet and that time to do that, those behaviors all but disappear, right? But with anxiety, certainly in small children, we see that often separation from parents. That can happen if they've been given too much information about what the world looks like and they don't know how to process that, or about illnesses, about death, those sorts of things. We have to remember that children don't have the capacity to understand things as we do. And I know that's hard. That's flushing from the whole other extreme of 50 years ago when we didn't tell kids anything. So we do want to inform our children. But if you overinform anyone, it just shuts them down. There's a place where knowledge can't be absorbed anymore. And when that happens, anxiety sets in. And so we start to see that often with younger children who have been overeducated in some places, or been told too much, or seen too much, or witnessed too much.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
So timing really is important as we share. There is such thing as age appropriateness for all sorts of different subjects.
And developmental appropriateness, right? Because there are children who reach developmental stages much higher. And a child can rush through one developmental stage and then stagger through another. There is no specific timeline for that. Even the earliest research says that those timelines, those years can be 5 to 7 years apart. And so you can never compare two kids in that way. And their age is really very unimportant for that. You have to be watching your kid and seeing like, how, when I give them this, what do they do with it? And if I give them this, what do they do with it? And start like, again, like a thermostat, watching and experimenting always. And the good thing about kids is that they're resilient. So you can always just pull back.
All right, so you've given us some really good tools, and I know people are going to want to connect with you somewhere, somehow. And so you did mention your website. Would you just tell me what that is? And I will link it in the show notes, and any other places we can find you, or did you have something on a landing page that we can download for this?
Absolutely. So you can find me at wildlycurative.com. I always suggest that you sign up for the newsletter because I send out all new information that way. We're kind of coming to a time where it's just imperative that people have information. So if you can't get in for a session with me or with one of the other girls that works here at the practice, you can download some of our courses, some of our class links there. There is a specific link on the page now, and that's for a core value clarity worksheet. I highly suggest, it's very inexpensive, that you print that off and do it for yourself and for your kids and anyone else that you're interested in doing it for. I wanted to have a way that people could easily and quickly access that information and start to realign their lives so that it could be more nourishing for them. You can also follow me at Wildly Curative on Instagram. It's at wildly.curative. I post a lot of things there about my farm and how nature shows up for me, and also like to give little tidbits that can help. My goal is always to empower through freedom. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at. I am on Facebook, but I don't ever check those things, so I don't recommend going there.
Well, we have to make choices of how we will spend our time, and I think that is wise for, we need to limit it sometimes, for sure. So, Elisa, would you close us out in a word of prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dear Lord, I thank you for our time together. I thank you for the people that these words will touch, and that their hearts would be empowered and strengthened by the knowledge that you are always looking out for us, that you always have our best interest at heart, and that you've empowered us as mothers and as fathers to raise our children up in a way that's better than we were raised, God. I ask that you would help these words come through clearly, and help parents be able to reach their children with grace and with freedom and with empowerment the same way that you reach us, Lord, in a loving and intentional way. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true, whatever is noble, think on these things.